We're in. Hello, Katie. Hello, everyone else. And thank you so much for joining us. I can see 26 little eye symbols there, which I assume means that you're with us. Apologies for the state of my camera. I shan't mention it again. Now, could you let me know not only where you are, but while we're waiting for everyone else to join, if you're watching there in the chat, can you let me know that the chat function is working by letting me know where you are and also what is your nearest bad tourist attraction? Just while we're waiting, and if any of those come in, I might ask my guests. Mary, where is your nearest bad tourist attraction? You're in. Are you in North Carolina?
I'm in North Carolina, so this might be too regional, but I'm in Durham, North Carolina, the home of Duke University. So our nearest bad tourist attraction is our rivals, UNC.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I've heard of that kind of rivalry in the States. Great. Katie says I'm in Oregon, and we have the last Blockbuster. That sounds like a genuinely good bad tourist attraction. Mumbai, India, Gateway of India, the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. Happy for Duke beating Clemson, but no need to throw us Tar Heels under the bus. That is a response from Brandon Tidwell, which is steeped in an enormous amount of local knowledge that I can't really cope with at the moment. My nearest bad tourist attraction is that I'm joining you from Bristol in the UK. And we have a Banksy. You'll have heard of Banksy, the graffiti artist. We had an original Banksy, 30 seconds walk from my house, painted on the side of someone else's house. And within a week of it being painted there, the wall had been specially removed and sold, and the owner of the house had sold the house and moved away. So our neighborhood claim to fame is a hole where there used to be a Banksy. Kira says she's in McMinnville, Oregon, right next to Disney Channel's original movie Halloween Town's film location. Very nice. Thank you, thank you. So we've got just a minute or so while we wait for everyone else. Nikki, I might ask you, what's your nearest bad tourist attraction?
Oh, well, maybe I should say I grew up in Stratford-on-Avon, which I know you have a link to too.
Oh, yes,
and there are a lot of tourist attractions in Stratford-on-Avon, some of which you spend more time standing outside than you do going in. So I don't think it would be bad, but Anne Hathaway's cottage was always a longer wait in line than actually inside. So.
Oh, lovely. Okay, well, there is that. Yes, I mean, that's a classic, I think, of anyone that lives near anything particularly famous is just to sort of walk past it every day. We've got just a minute. It's quickly time for Vanessa. Could you tell us your nearest bad tourist attraction while we're waiting?
I live in DC, so there's
Vanessa, we've lost your audio.
Oh.
Could you mime your nearest bad tourist attraction?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Do we have you now?
But I don't know if Stuart,
you don't feel like we have your sound. Mary, you nodded. Does that mean you do have Vanessa's sound?
Yes.
Oh, I can't hear Vanessa. Well, this should make for a fun session.
That's going to make
Vanessa,
it easy.
if we could all just turn it off and on again a few more times. I'm glad we had the yoga session earlier on, because without that, I would now be feeling very tense about the state of the technology. While I'm waiting to hear from you, Vanessa, Renee, do you have a tourist attraction near you?
Well, actually, last night it wasn't a bad one. It was actually a great tourist attraction. I went to see the quarterfinals at Arthur Ashe. It was just very warm in New York, but it was a beautiful
lovely.
2 matches we've seen. So that was a nice tourist attraction, I would say.
Very nice, very nice. Let's see if Vanessa has joined my audio at least. Otherwise, Mary will need to translate for us. Vanessa, do we have you?
Do you hear me?
Oh, I do. Praise the Lord.
Fantastic. So I live in DC, Washington, DC. I would say there is a hefty choice of bad attractions. So depending on the incumbent of the White House, I'd say the White House. But
I see. Very nice, very nice. A kind of conditional one. Very smart. So listen, we're about to we'll crack on. We're 1 minute past, and we've got lots of people with us. Laurie says the Eiffel Tower is not for them, and Tom says the gum wall, which I'll be Googling as soon as we've finished here. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us at this session. My name's Stuart Goldsmith. I'm a professional comedian tackling the climate crisis and personal sustainability one punchline at a time. But today I'm going to be in host mode as I welcome 4 corporate leaders to talk about their net zero goals, strategies, and actionable solutions. So later, we're going to discuss some possible scenarios in which things like that might become important. But first, let's do some introductions. First, I'm going to introduce each person by name and then ask for a fascinating fact about themselves. First, we have the Executive Vice President and Chief Science Officer of PepsiCo. It's Rennie Lammers. Hello there, Rennie.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you for the introduction, and good to see you all or hear you all on this fantastic sort of occasion. Listen, one thing that people probably don't know about me is my hobbies are, if you look at it from a continuing perspective, quite extreme. On the one hand, I'm a big Formula One fan. I love all the innovation, the speed, and the excitement. A little plug here. I just posted a little article on LinkedIn together with a fellow food scientist, making the connection between F1 and science, or food science. But then on the other end of the spectrum, I'm actually a big bird watcher. So I don't know how that works in my brain, but that's
yes, that
that's
sounds
me.
like there's some very, very small niche forums dedicated to the pursuit of both of those interests. Thank you, Rennie.
Indeed.
That's Rennie there from PepsiCo. We also have Vanessa Miller-Fells, the VP Global Environment of Schneider Electrical. And Vanessa, you have a bit of an earth-shaking fascination, do you not?
I grew up fascinated by volcanoes. My father is a geologist, and so whether they're active or dormant, I would go and climb volcanoes. And I grew up in France, and there's two volcanologists that were extremely famous when I grew up, Maurice and Katja Kraft. So I invite you all to, I'll post in a chat, a movie that's really a documentary that's really worth seeing.
Excellent. I was doing a little bit of research before this, and I found out there is a sport called volcano boarding, which may interest you, where people slide down volcanoes, this is true, on thin strips of plywood. And according to Wikipedia, potential dangers include falling and being cut by ash, breathing poisonous gas, or being hit by flying molten lava. So you can maybe give that a try your next holiday. Next, we also have the Vice President of Innovation, Science and Technology at Mars. We have Nikki Bush. Hello, Nikki.
Hello. So we went from Earth to Mars. So, my kind of interesting fact is, as we talked about biodiversity, I think earlier on in the call, is my maiden name was Seed, S-E-E-D. I went to Bush, and the job at the time, because I spent a lot of time in manufacturing, was a plant manager. And so when I called up the credit card companies to change my name, they thought it was a practical joke. So a lot around biodiversity for you.
Oh, bless you. Well, there's lots of positive biodiversity there. Thank you, Nikki. And finally, we welcome the Executive Director of Global ESG and Regulatory Compliance, Mary Jack. And I believe your first job, Mary, was working at a movie theatre.
It was, yeah. But even before that, my original career aspiration was I wanted to be a detective. And so I try to find some joy in what I do now and trying to solve, the big challenges that we're all facing.
Oh, very good. We're going to need detectives. Thank you. Thank you, Mary. So that's all of my panelists. And we're going to start with a little game, an interactive game for those of you active in the chat. A little game called Name That Sustainability Report, which rather rolls off the tongue. I'm going to share a line from the most recent sustainability reports from Mars, Pepsi, Lenovo, and Schneider Electric. And you in the audience will have to try and guess who it belongs to. Now, this game has never been played before. It's never been tried. I have absolute faith in it. But you in the chat will need to respond quickly so as to not leave us all hanging. So here we go. I will now read this one. And in the chat, please jump in and let me know whether you think this is Lenovo, Mars, Pepsi, or Schneider. So here we are. Our commitment to net zero will require an immense amount of alignment and support. And this won't be possible without the innovation that's fueled by diverse perspectives and an inclusive culture. Any ideas there? Now that we're, oh, there we go. Oh, look, it's been very carefully. I assume Nick has cut and pasted that somehow, but otherwise that's some incredibly fast typing. Lenovo, Pepsi, Sydney says Lenovo. Lenovo and Pepsi seem to be the biggest ones. I'm pleased to say first with the right answer was Ada Chavez. The answer is indeed Lenovo. So Mary, can you tell us why inclusion is so significant to Lenovo and to you?
Yeah, so I love that quote for two reasons. One is the inclusion piece, because the solutions and the path to net zero are going to require a huge diversity of thought and collaboration across the value chain, but also the net zero part, which is it's so important that we all be speaking the same language and be aligned to the science. So there's the aspect of having credible commitments that are aligned to science and the collaboration and diversity of thought that are required to solve this big problem.
Excellent. Thank you. An excellent answer. And well done, Ada, and those of you in the chat who said Lenovo. You must be pleased, Mary, to see that so many of them correctly called it. That was you. So here we go. The next one, and this one is a bit of a mouthful, so I shall take a deep breath. We continue to prioritize working collectively with our farmers to advance the adoption of regenerative agriculture practices, a set of techniques designed to improve and restore ecosystems across impact areas to make soil healthier, capture carbon, improve watershed health, protect and enhance biodiversity, and strengthen farmer livelihoods by optimizing their long-term yields and farm income. So we've heard from Lenovo. Could that be Schneider, PepsiCo, or Mars? Jump in. Nick has given us a link to the quote there. Thank you very much. Mars, Mars, Mars. A lot of people saying Mars. So it may come as some surprise to you to know that the answer is PepsiCo. Rene, can you tell us what it is about regenerative agriculture that makes such a difference to your goals?
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. And what a surprise. But you may not know, but we're a company where we pretty much secure 30, or procure, if you say, 30 agricultural crops and ingredients. We have 7 million acres of farmland. We have 900,000 acres currently now that are, dealing with regenerative practices. But so we are very, if you go up the value chain, a very sort of vertically integrated company with food systems. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So working closely with our farmers, making sure also in R&D that we are working on the next generation of crop varieties that they can actually grow locally with farmers, particularly the smallholder farmers is important for us as well, so that they, farm sustainably our crops, but do it in a way that is commercially attractive to them. So for us, our commitment as part of our sustainability sort of framework is working closely with farmers to make sure that we really are implementing across our ecosystem regenerative practices. Back to you, Stu.
Excellent, thank you. And there's some questions coming in on that in the chat, which we might refer to back in a moment. Next up, and you've got a choice of two now, we have Mars and Schneider. Can you tell us, those of you in the chat, whose organization is this? The line is, we have reduced the greenhouse gas emissions of our full value chain by 8% as of 2022 compared to our 2015 baseline. This is the result of our work to stop deforestation in cocoa and palm, to reformulate our recipes to be climate smart, and to reduce the emissions from our operations. Now, does anyone here think that was Schneider? Yes, I think Mars, correctly. A lot of people have gone for Mars there. So, Nikki, tell us, what's the importance of that line above any other?
So for me, that line's really important for three reasons. First of all, it really shows that you can grow your business and do good for the planet at the same time. So while we've got to 8% reduction, we've actually grown our business 60% across that time. So it's not an either or, and I think that's really important. The second thing for me that's really important is it's the full value chain. So I think many of us have talked about that. It's from the farm right through to the consumer's home. And it's really important that as a big business, we take responsibility for all of it. So that's important to me. And then thirdly, I wanted to pick a quote of actually delivering today rather than a promise for the future. So think of our first thing, which was ambition to action. I picked something where we've actually delivered those results by 2022. So that's why it was important. Oh, Stuart, you're on mute. Still on mute. The famous COVID quote. No, still on mute.
How is that? Am I back?
You're back.
You are
back. Thanks so much. Apparently I'm present twice. Well, thank you. I missed the last 10 seconds.
Oh, no.
No.
I have to say, when I freeze on camera, I don't freeze as photogenically as he is frozen. So
I 100% agree.
I will take that one as a win.
Some good one to exchange. Guess there's not much guessing for anyway the last quote. So
How's that? I can see myself.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Now If
We're
you
all
can hear me,
deciding
that's
who was going to
wonderful,
be the
but,
new moderator.
I can't hear any of you.
Oh no.
So I will simply I'll try and fix this again, but in order to move on, and apologies, I'm having some technical issues here. If you can hear me, I will simply give Vanessa the line from the Schneider Sustainability Report, which is this, which you can then maybe espouse on, Vanessa, while I try and rejoin. Partnership is at the heart of the Zero Carbon Project, which aims to reduce Scope 1 and 2 of the top 1,000 suppliers by 50% by 2023. This is especially important as over 70% of participant suppliers had no previous experience of greenhouse gas emissions quantification. So my question, which the answer of which I won't hear, but maybe our panel will hear it, is what is it about your partnerships? What is it about your partnerships that draws your focus? And if you'd like to pass that on to your co-panelists, I shall attempt to rejoin for a third time.
No worries. So I chose this for two reasons. First, because it's all about partnership, and I think this alludes to what you already said, Mary, at the beginning. We're in this together. Obviously, as you also said, Nikki, we have to report our whole value chain, both from the supply chain down to the customer side, and we'll need to partner with both the upstream and the downstream. And the second thing, I chose this quote because it shows that even though there is ambitious and science-based commitments that have been taken by a growing set of companies, most companies are still ill-equipped to face the challenge and to even start establishing a baseline. It will take those that are slightly further along to onboard newcomers to carbon accounting if we want to move at the pace that's required to keep us on track for 1.5 degree scenario. And it takes these partnership, these collaboration that Schneider has been deploying through our sustainability business, but it also will take digital solutions that are yet to be developed. So I think it really kind of shows both the positive aspect of partnership, but also that sometimes the glass is a little bit half empty still to be able to deliver collectively on these commitments.
Well, thank you.
And I don't know, Stuart, if you're
I
if you're
don't
still
think
here.
Stuart can hear us.
So
I think we can hear Stuart though.
Typing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if you can hear me. I've just been suggested. My thanks to Charlie Leach in the comments, who has just suggested that I enable closed captions in order to read what the party is saying, which does work to an extent. But I don't know if that is going to enable me to conclude this in the way in which, with the sort of the content that it deserves. I understand, Ryan, that you can enable lip reading, says Bill. These are all very useful suggestions, but my challenge for some reason, Hopin, is not delivering the sound to me. Thank you, Mike. At least this is the comedy session. What I can do is I will thank you, Vanessa, for what I have to assume was an illuminating answer. What I'll do is I'll set you up with the first scenario that we had considered before that we might talk about. I'll announce that, and then I will pull out all the stops and turn the computer off and on again. So in order that we move on with this, and incredibly, we are actually keeping perfectly to time, so at least that's going right. I'm going to share a few scenarios with you and invite the panel to discuss how they'd think about and solve the situation, speaking from their own expertise. So the first one is this: reducing the climate impact, greenhouse gases, and the utilization of planetary resources, water and energy and so on, is everyone's responsibility. But the most impactful solutions are rarely accomplished by one single organization alone. So how do you partner with external stakeholders to create valuable solutions at scale? How do you identify which partners to pursue? Now, if you don't mind, I shall hand over to you, the panel, to discuss that while I turn the machine off and on again. I shall hopefully see you in a moment with full audio. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so I'm happy to start, and I'll agree with Mark Chen that he's doing an amazing job of handling this. We've all had technical difficulties over the last few years. So I think the question was, how do you decide what external stakeholders to work with? So I can start, and then maybe others can build on. So for me, the first thing to do is to really think about your own supply chain, and I think we've all kind of talked about that. If I think about Mars, we've been working with over 20,000 suppliers for them to set their own net zero targets, and then working both upstream and downstream of the supply chain to try and really ensure our own supply chain we're working and kind of building those targets together and building that improvement together. And then for me, the second part is how do you collaborate across industry? And this may be, I hope, is news. 7 businesses, and Renee and myself were part of this, got together to put together a net zero playbook that from the view of an R&D leader, and we would love to share that with this group. It's been a great collaboration where there are frameworks that you can have a look as an R&D leader and think about how you might approach net zero and how you might collaborate internally and externally. So hopefully someone, yes, Christina has put a link to that in the chat. I want to thank the Science Forum who helped us do that across 7 different businesses. So maybe I hand over to someone else who'd like to add on anything around external collaboration. What do you look for?
Maybe I add another thing, because I think for most company, I mean, for an average company, value chain emissions, as you said, are the most important. I mean, they're typically 7 to 10-fold the emissions from operations. But they're the upstream. So you talked about the supply chain, but they're also sometimes the downstream, the customers. And for Schneider Electric, for example, upstream emissions, that is the embodied carbon in the goods and the services we purchase, is only 12% of our emissions. And downstream, which is mainly the emissions from the electricity that are consumed by our customers using our products, represent 88% of the emissions. So for us, it's not just about partnering with our supply chain and the 30,000 plus suppliers. It's also partnering with our customer. It's really at the heart of our strategy. And it's a very different ball game to figure out how we can support customers in the purchase of carbon-free electricity, and going back to policies, how do we support the policies or in the infrastructure, for example, the medium low voltage that enables the carbon-free grid of the future. So it's maybe like in addition to supply chain, customers, and then you said industry partnership. I think these are the 3 we've already mentioned. Maybe Mary or Renee.
Yeah, maybe I can, to make it a little bit more specific, if we as a company have ambitious goals around packaging, yeah, and for instance, currently 88% of our packaging is being designed to be recyclable or compostable or biodegradable. But we also know that some of the challenges that we face in the entire value chain of packaging is sufficient collection or lack thereof, sortation, waste management infrastructures, policy sometimes. And what you need to do, therefore, through these partnerships is really get all those parties together in one room, so to speak, and find solutions for these individual parts of the value chain. So it is a real life example for one of our most ambitious sort of climate goals around packaging, that partnerships is the only way to go. And then I would build on top of that, is that also in the pre-competitive space, sometimes brand owners like Mars, like a PepsiCo, should work together and maybe do something around specification setting and harmonization of some of the materials we want to introduce, because of course, when everybody comes with their own sort of material solution, that's not going to work from a recycling perspective either. So there is no other way than collaboration and partnership to address some of these total systems challenges. And for us, that is very specific around packaging.
Thank you, Renee. I'm pleased to say I can hear you now. If you can all hear me, then I can try and insert myself back into this conversation. If you could just catch me up. Has anyone yet to throw anything into the mix on that particular scenario?
So I'll just add, I think a lot of the points that have been made, I would echo. One additional thing I'll add, so certainly the value chain from a customer and supplier perspective is a huge impact to us as we think about our climate impact. But I'll just mention the importance of like NGO and expert partnerships. So working with groups like the SBTI, they're out there setting standards that help everyone align to common goals and to the path to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees by 2050, and how important it is for us to align with groups like that, or whatever group is applicable to you and your industry, to make sure that we're engaging in partnerships across different industries, all working together towards a common goal like net zero through groups like the SBTI and others.
and others. Thank you. I just wanted to come back to what you were saying, Renee, about harmonization. To what extent is that a possibility across such kind of diverse organizations? Because I think that's something that to me as a consumer is a really fascinating idea, that everyone could just sort of agree on one way of doing it, one way of packaging, one way of marketing, and how realistic you think that is, and what are what is the likelihood of that being adopted?
I mean, thank you, Stu, for the question. I think there is no option then to standardize some of these things, because otherwise you'll introduce so much complexity in the total value chain that it will be impossible take the packaging example, for instance, for a recycler to have to deal with different types of materials that then requires dedicated sortation. That will all drive cost into the system. So I think there are a couple of critical enablers when you want to drive success. And I think, some degree of standardization. Of course, there's always competition in the system. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think when it comes to some of these technology standardizations, I think it's very important, because otherwise I don't think you will move the needle in that sense. So the answer is pretty straightforward, Stuart. There is no other way, in my view, than to just do that. Is it easy? No, you know what I mean? Because sometimes you need different technology solutions. There's a cost element to it. But I think responsible companies, like a few here that are around the Zoom, really have the intent to just do that. Typically in the early stage of these sort of projects, if you like, or changes. So we call it then sort of pre-competitive public-private partnership, that I think are the right setups in order to drive some of that standardization. Nikki, I don't know, want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, if I think about things like the regenerative agriculture and just even the standards around what does that mean, only 15% of the agriculture today is regenerative. The work that if we get together, I think about the work that Pepsi's doing, I think about the work that Mars is doing and others are doing, so that we can make sure we can support the farmers. Because I think, as Vanessa said earlier, if we only focus on what's in our, certainly for us, what's in our direct kind of scope 1 and 2 is less than 5%. If you look at agriculture is 2/3 for us, and for the whole planet, it's 1/3 of the agriculture is 1/3 of the greenhouse gas issues. So standards like that and harmony that really help farmers, I think, are really key.
And the one thing I would add about standards is I think we all talked about net zero, and you mentioned SBTi. We also need kind of more standards in how we speak about and how we measure what we're doing. And this is what the carbon accounting is also the baseline for. It's the baseline for measuring and kind of assessing things. And so I think there are standards on like the solution, but even before the solutions, we're all looking for standards to measure things. And for example, from my industry, there's a lot of standards right now that are being discussed, at least at the EU level, on repairability or durability of electrical equipment. And I see quite a bit of a parallel with, for example, Energy Star, which became a standard that is now, widely recognized. And it definitely allowed huge progress on energy efficiency on most devices. You could say that sometimes standards can be a low common denominator, but I think it definitely helps kind of at least set some baselines and some basis.
I think that brings us neatly to our next question, the idea of assessment and standards. And our next question is this: when you review your internal organization's net zero progress, your scorecard, whatever that is, what do you pay most attention to? What is your litmus test for evaluating if you're doing enough? And can I maybe I'll ask Mary to field that one for us first.
Yeah, so I sound a little bit like a broken record, but it's true. So for us, I think our biggest scorecard is our net zero targets that we've had validated to the Science Based Targets Initiative new net zero standard. And for us, that provides a framework for us to set goals, near-term goals for 2030 and our ultimate long-term goal for 2050. But we know we can't just, set a target for 7 or 27 years out and walk away from it. So in addition to that, we're leveraging something that most of us have already had in place for many years, which is our environmental management system. And so that's a really effective tool for us to set annual goals that help keep us going along the pathway to our near-term and long-term goals. And for us, it provides a very nice framework for having internal and external visibility. We have a set of reviews that we do with all the senior leaders. They can see where they are on the path. We have KPIs that they're responsible for. So looking at the goals themselves and the annual targets that we set is a really good scorecard for us.
Okay, and is that reflected amongst the other organisations, Nikki? Is that something that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big, big vote for the Science-Based Targets Initiative. It's something that we would always look at to ensure that both you're including everything that's in scope and that you're doing it in the way that the Science-Based Targets Initiative would value. I think the other thing for me is it's about milestones and making sure you're delivering progress over perfection now. It's an area under the curve, so whatever we can do now and whatever we can do in the next 2 or 3 years versus really great targets, but they're too far out. It's about what we can do and while we're in our roles, which is, I think, very important.
I think that goes some way towards answering a question in the chat stream from Phil Redman. SBTI has been great, but there's a view that it doesn't go far enough and support current goals and timelines. I imagine that's sort of an answer to that, really, in terms of how far can you go when you need to focus on a specific framework. You need to sort of resolve, as you've said, to choose about doing something now rather than 20 years from now. Vanessa,
what you want to avoid? Sorry, what you want to, sorry, Vanessa. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Feel free.
You didn't interrupt. You're on a mild delay. The floor is yours, Renee.
I apologize. No, just to build on it, I think the most important thing is sometimes we spend a lot of time on talking about these absolute goals, and which year. I mean, it feels like sometimes there's a bit of competition. I'm more interested when I look at what the shape of the progress is, So if everything looks like a hockey stick, that's not a big idea. So for me, it's more like, how do you build technology roadmap, commercialization roadmaps that are, showing a sort of a more progressive rather than a hockey stick type of model. And I think that for me is the focus, the trend of the curve, rather than exactly which year or which absolute number, because I think sometimes that's not the right discussion to have, or not. That's not where most of our time should be in terms of spending our time.
Do you think that the idea of the hockey stick model has kind of it's almost sort of it's such a popular idea and such a pithy and shareable idea that it detracts from a sort of a slower, more kind of measured kind of progress?
Well, my view is if you see everything as a hockey stick, then you're not looking at reality. I mean, then you're not going to hit it. You know what I mean? So you want to have a more developed curve, more evenly distributed curve in terms of making progress. And sometimes you need technology unlocks, and therefore it's more back-end loaded. There are good reasons why. But I think if against every KPI you have in your ESG report, you would show back-end loaded sort of graphs in terms of getting there, then I think that's not realistic. So that, for instance, give an example, very simple example. In PepsiCo, we've had product goals, for quite some time now, increase what we call the permissibility of our core products, reducing sugar and all those sort of things. We are making now very significant progress in terms of hitting our product goals. And it is not a hockey stick. It's just a straight line, if you like, in order to get to our goals. So those are the curves I'd like to see in trends in terms of meeting our goals. So that's sort of
thank you.
my
does that resonate for you as well, Vanessa?
I think there's things that resonate in the sense we need short-term goals, of course, like we need to show continuous progress. And as you said, Nikki, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Like you first need to grab what you can grab. There's a lot of low-hanging fruits there. I'm sure we'll have a occasion to talk about it. But 70% of the technologies that's needed to meet net zero world exist. It's energy efficiency, electrification, renewable energy. It's not rocket science. And it's there and it can be deployed, and even the prices is going down. And obviously I say that because it's a business of Schneider, but it's not just that. It's also what we do with our suppliers. It's what I've done in previous roles at other companies before I joined the electrical, business of Schneider. But I think we still need, maybe to echo Mary again, like we still need to kind of be aligned with science. And for me, there's something that you said, Nikki, that really resonated. Like thinking in absolute terms is how I'm thinking. Because at the end of the day, what matters for the planet is the total amount of carbon concentration in the atmosphere that's measured in ppm. And we can all make good progress on carbon efficiency. And I think all of our companies have done tremendous progress on carbon efficiency. But being able to do progress in carbon reduction in absolute terms is a lot harder. And the numbers show how harder it is. And that's what when I'm entering in a room is like, okay, where are we going in relative terms? But where are we going in relative terms? And I know it's harder, like to what Renee said. So it's like, well, what can you grab now? Let's do it. And then, but let's keep in mind that the ultimate goal is definitely going to be an absolute term. And then what I've become more and more aware, and that's maybe because I come from a different industry than obviously the ag and the food and ag industry, but we need to think a lot more beyond carbon and beyond greenhouse gas emission in the manufacturing industry and incorporate nature. I spoke to someone last week, and they mentioned a quote, but I don't know where it's coming from. I looked on the internet but couldn't find it. It's carbon is about how we live, and nature biodiversity is about whether we live. And at the end of the day, we shouldn't kind of miss, the end game. Obviously, it sometimes seems to be a bit too big picture, too hard to connect to the business, but we have to find ways to connect it to the business because otherwise we fail.
When we're talking about finding ways, that brings us neatly to our next question. And congratulations, Vanessa. You got the most number of applause emojis in the chats for that. I think we're all on board with that. So our final scenario before we move on to some lightning questions to wrap up this panel is this, and I'll address this again to all four of you. You're brought into a meeting where your team is kicking off an innovation project. What design considerations, product manufacturing, etc., do you take into account to ensure that sustainability is embedded from end to end? What are some potential trade-offs you may need to make, and how do you go about prioritizing them? Does anyone have a burning desire to start us off with that one? If not, I shall come to you, Nikki, because you're the most brightly coloured with your clothes. You caught my eye.
I think the first question is, and I know I'm head of innovation, but the first question is, all right, what's the role of this? Is this, first thing about any type of new product is, do we really need this? And is it something I think anything you would first say is reduce, reuse, recycle, right? So do we need it to start off with, or is this something that's just fulfilling a short-term gap? So I think that's important to start off with. I think the second thing I would look at is, this is you shouldn't be looking at it narrowly just in terms of looking at carbon. You should be looking at this from what is this doing from a water usage, what is this doing from land usage, what is this doing in terms of what kind of product is it, and is it something that's good from a health perspective? We actually feed half the world's pets in Mars, and and in our vet business, we have 70,000 people in vets as well. So the first thing we think about is better world for pets. So is it doing the right thing? So for me, it's about you can be, and sometimes with sustainability initiatives, you can be quite narrow, and then you're actually causing a problem in a different place. So for me, those would be my two. Do we need it in the first place? And are we broad enough? Is this really creating a better world for pets if I take our pet business?
Thank you, Nikki. Mary, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, so my border collie thanks you, Nikki. But yeah, to build on your excellent point. So I think one of the things that when we're thinking about innovation as it intersects with climate change or ESG in general, I think we're of course always looking for big innovations that can make a huge difference and move the needle. But beyond that, it's really important that we be thinking about everything we do and how we can drive incremental improvements, whether it's in how we build our factories, where we locate our factories, the types of technologies that we use within our manufacturing plant. So driving things that maybe only impact one process, like we have a low temperature soldering process that allows us to lower the temperature on the ovens on our manufacturing lines. Well, that impacts just one part of the process, but it all adds up. Then we have to think about, from a product design perspective, are we designing technologies that help our customers improve their carbon efficiencies? So doing things like using warm water to cool servers as opposed to fans, which require electricity. And then when you take it out and continue to play it out all the way across the value chain, what are we doing even to move our products in a more carbon effective manner? So looking at things like where we locate our factories to be closer to the customers, what types of global logistics we use, whether it's leveraging sustainable aviation or marine fuels, or ground transportation where you can. So I think my main point is that innovation can be big and it can have really huge impacts, but it also can, where it's really important that every part of the business be thinking about the carbon impact of the choices they're making and how they can optimize the overall carbon efficiencies of what they control. And together, it really does add up to making a big difference.
Thank you. Renee, let's come to you next. Potential trade-offs and the priorities thereof.
Yeah, listen, I mean, we face them all the time in terms of, areas you want to move into. I can give you a very simple example. As part of making our products healthier, we're moving into different types of oils. Yeah. But generally, sometimes these oils from a nutrition perspective, we're good. But then from a GHG perspective or water usage perspective, these crops are less sort of preferential. So the most important thing is we've called that sustainable from the start. In each discussion, whether it's an M&A, whether it's an R&D investment discussion or anything, is that we apply the sustainable from the start sort of principle, at least to have the conversation. Yeah. Doesn't always mean that we are not moving into a space if sustainably, you know what I mean, it might not be the best choice, but then we'll have to find ways of, going deeper reductions in other parts of our value chain. So for me, the bigger point, and I've seen huge improvements over the last couple of years, that conversation is actually happening. I think 10 years ago, it wasn't even a discussion. And I think that's the good news. So that's how we go about it. But yeah, there are sometimes trade-offs. You know what I mean? You need to be, eyes wide open. Yeah, that's the most important thing.
Thank you, Renee. And Vanessa, I'll let you wrap this one up. Embedded sustainability end to end.
Yeah, I think the examples we gave kind of show that sustainability requires complex system thinking. You're kind of at the heart of everything, and if you want to put eco design at the heart of the transformation of really the economy that we're trying to drive here, I would say the biggest challenge we're facing right now is it starts by measuring at every step of the design process the carbon, but not just the carbon impact, the full life cycle impact of every choice we're making. And to be frank, these means that designers that are engineering designers that are not necessarily trained in carbon accounting or water depletion or in whatever environmental aspects will need to have to deal with a lot more data points, and will have indeed to make arbitrage between very, very challenging trade-offs. For example, I mean, this is something we're facing like right now. You can choose a more energy efficient chip, but it may be made of materials and processes that are more carbon intensive. And so that would increase our embodied carbon footprint, but it would decrease our downstream emissions. So you have to then be able to measure what is exactly the impact and what are the solution that you will ultimately have, because ultimately you have to get to net zero. So even if it's good, if you're to echo, like we need to reduce whatever can be reduced as fast as possible. So if the benefit is greater on the reduction, let's go for that. But then if there is another negative impact, whether it's on water or whether it's other parts of the carbon value chain, then you need to think already like, okay, what do I have in the future to be able to address this? And I have to admit that today, I mean, this is really a huge area of investment, both in terms of how do we train our engineers, but also how do we equip ourselves with the right kind of data systems and data intelligence to be able to do this at scale. I will say on sustainability, I feel illiterate, and I've been in that field for my whole life. In fact, if I count I was raised by my father as a geologist, but like there's so much things that we don't know about the impact of the things we're building. And every day you read a report about, something that we didn't know have this impact and has this impact. And so we need to have also better tools. And here is more like a call to kind of the whole ecosystem. I mean, we know there's tools out there and we're testing some, but they all need to be kind of smarter and be available to everyone to be able to make those changes. I mean, going back to the quote I gave earlier, 70% of the suppliers we're working with don't even know how to start reporting their scope 1, 2, let alone their scope 3. So
thank you. More literacy for everyone on the subject. And so to wrap up then, before I thank the panelists and let them all go, we would like to round off with some lightning questions. We have 3 minutes for this, so they will have to be actual lightning questions. So Vanessa, what is the net zero tool that you use the most?
I mentioned it earlier. It's the trio: energy efficiency, electrification, carbon-free electricity. We need all more of the 3, and by 2030, we need to triple the amount of renewable electricity, energy efficiency. I don't remember exactly, but we need to kind of dramatically increase the investments on that field too. So just more of the 3.
More of the 3. Thank you. Nikki, this one's for you. What organizations are you watching related to their work with consumers or R&D to drive sustainable growth?
Pepsi's work on sustainable agriculture, the work on regenerative agriculture. If I take our own, some of the inspiration of things like Ben's Original, we make rice. Actually, rice is a staple for half the planet, the world's population. And so things like alternate wet drying of rice, which reduces how you make rice, reduces the climate impact by 40% and reduces the water by 50%. So if we can get that out everywhere, that's going to be great.
Excellent. Thank you. Mary, what are the business partners that you rely on the most for resources?
So it's a very long list, but I think one of the things I want to highlight is to echo what Vanessa said, the importance of data and making sure that we're bringing our partners, including our suppliers, up the maturity curve and helping them learn what we expect and what has worked for us. So one of the tools that we've been deploying is trying to get a lot of the different data systems to talk to each other and come together under one platform, because there is a tremendous amount of data that's required to actually make sure you're measuring yourself accurately and you're able to tell if you're really making progress.
Okay, thank you. And Renee, last one for you. What is something undervalued or overvalued?
I think undervalued is, and we don't talk about it enough in my humble opinion, is the human capital agenda around sustainability and net zero and what companies are doing about it. I think you will not be able to recruit the future leaders into your organization if you mean business about this. So I think the talent agenda is critically, it's not only about getting the right talent in, but it is the messaging, the progress you're making, why you're doing this as a company. That's why the next generation of leaders are joining us. So for me, that's an undervalued element of this. It's critically important to make progress in this regard because it's better for the people, the planet, and all those sort of great things. But it's also the route to be able to attract the best possible talent in the future. So for me, that's undervalued.
Thank you. Thanks, Renee. That's a great answer. Thank you to everybody for being involved. Thanks to everyone in the audience for attending. And of course, thanks to our panel, Mary, Nikki, Renee, and Vanessa. I hope you're all looking forward to the next sessions. The next 30 minutes include options for a guided meditation, as well as networking. And of course, after that, more breakouts and workshops. I've been Stuart Goldsmith. Thanks for listening to me. I promise that we do have working internet in the UK. I've been using it for the last 12 hours with no problems, but there we are. And a tech manager will be in the chat as well to let you know how to navigate to your next options. But would you please join me with your round of applause emojis for Renee, Nikki, Mary, and Vanessa. Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki,
Thank you,
Mary.
Stuart.
Thank you.